They called her just the Armory Clerk, a quiet woman who stamped requisition forms and counted ammunition cases. But none of them knew that when she finally picked up that Barrett .50 caliber rifle, her forgotten skills would be the only thing standing between their base and complete annihilation. The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete floors of Weapons Storage Facility Delta 7 as Staff Sergeant Maya Chun shuffled through another stack of inventory reports, her weathered hands moving with the mechanical precision of someone who had performed the same tasks thousands of times before Dotted 34. Maya had perfected the art of invisibility within the sprawling military complex of Joint Base Andrews. Her faded CU uniform hung loosely on her small frame, the fabric showing the telltale signs of countless wash cycles and years of wear. The sleeves were rolled up to reveal surprisingly muscular forearms, though most people never looked closely enough to notice. Her black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun that had seen better days, with strands constantly escaping to frame a face that seemed designed to blend into any crowd. Behind wire-rimmed glasses that she adjusted constantly, her dark eyes held a depth that suggested experiences far beyond her current mundane responsibilities. The armory where Maya spent her days was a cathedral of military hardware, row upon row of weapons racks stretching toward industrial ceiling lights that hummed with electrical persistence. M4 carbines stood at attention in their designated slots, their polymer stocks gleaming under the fluorescent glow. Heavy machine guns occupied reinforced positions along the walls, while specialized weapons filled locked cases that required multiple signatures to access. The air carried the distinctive scent of gun oil, metal polish, and the faint residue of cosmoline that seemed to permeate every surface despite constant cleaning efforts. Maya's workstation occupied a corner of the main storage area, a battered metal desk surrounded by filing cabinets that had served the military since before she was born. Her computer, an aging desktop unit that wheezed through basic functions, displayed endless spreadsheets tracking weapon assignments, maintenance schedules, and ammunition inventories. Stacks of requisition forms covered most of the available surface space, each one requiring her careful attention and signature before any equipment could be released to operational units. The daily routine had become as predictable as sunrise. Maya arrived each morning at 0-6-30, exactly 30 minutes before the official start of duty hours. She would brew coffee in a dented pot that had somehow survived multiple base transfers, the bitter liquid providing the caffeine necessary to face another day of bureaucratic tedium. Her breakfast consisted of a protein bar and whatever fruit she had packed the night before, consumed while reviewing overnight reports and preparing for the inevitable stream of soldiers who would need equipment throughout the day. By 0700, the first customers would begin arriving. Young Marines seeking replacement parts for their assigned weapons, seasoned NCOs collecting specialized equipment for training exercises, and officers requiring signature authority for high-value items. Maya processed each request with quiet efficiency, checking serial numbers against databases, verifying authorization levels, and maintaining the meticulous records that kept the complex machinery of military logistics functioning smoothly. Her interactions with personnel followed a consistent pattern that had developed over her 3 years at Joint Base Andrews. Soldiers would approach her window, sliding requisition forms across the worn metal counter while maintaining the bored expression of people completing routine tasks. Maya would review their paperwork with practiced eyes, occasionally asking clarifying questions in a voice so soft that many had to lean forward to hear her responses. She would disappear into the storage areas to retrieve requested items, returning with equipment that she would inspect once more before obtaining the required signatures. If you're enjoying stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. The physical demands of her position were more significant than most people realized. Individual weapons might weigh only a few pounds, but cases of ammunition could exceed 50 pounds each. Heavy weapon systems required careful handling and often demanded the use of mechanical aids to move safely. Maya had developed techniques for managing these loads efficiently, using leverage and momentum to compensate for her smaller stature. Her movements had a fluid quality that spoke of someone who understood how to work with her body rather than against it. The storage facility itself was a maze of interconnected rooms and corridors, each serving specific functions within the broader mission of weapons management. The main storage area housed individual weapons and basic equipment. Specialized rooms contained sensitive items requiring additional security measures. Climate-controlled spaces protected electronic equipment and optics from environmental damage. Underground vaults secured the most dangerous weapons and explosive materials under layers of concrete and steel that could withstand significant attacks. Maya knew every inch of this facility with the intimacy of someone who had walked its corridors countless times. She understood which storage rooms offered the best climate control for sensitive equipment, which corridors provided the most efficient routes for moving heavy loads, and which security systems required specific procedures to navigate safely. This knowledge had been accumulated through months of patient observation and careful attention to details that others might overlook. Her personal workspace reflected a mind that valued organization and efficiency above aesthetics. Every tool had its designated place, from the various wrenches needed for weapon maintenance to the measuring devices required for ammunition inspection. Reference manuals were arranged by frequency of use, with the most commonly consulted volumes within easy reach. A small whiteboard tracked ongoing projects and daily priorities, its surface covered with neat handwriting that outlined tasks in order of importance. Computer skills had become increasingly important in her role as military record-keeping transition to digital systems. Maya had adapted to these changes with the same quiet competence that characterized her approach to other challenges. She could navigate complex databases to locate specific information, generate reports that satisfied various administrative requirements, and troubleshoot basic technical problems that might otherwise delay operations. These abilities had made her valuable to supervisors who appreciated subordinates capable of independent problem solving. The social dynamics of her workplace created an environment where Maya could observe without being observed. Personnel visiting the armory were typically focused on completing their business as quickly as possible, paying little attention to the woman behind the counter who processed their requests. This invisibility had become both a protective mechanism and a source of information, allowing her to overhear conversations and observe behaviors that revealed much about the personalities and capabilities of those she served. Lunch breaks provided temporary respite from the constant stream of requests and paperwork. Maya typically ate alone in a small break room adjacent to the main storage area, using the time to catch up on professional reading or review training materials that might improve her job performance. She avoided the main dining facilities where groups of soldiers gathered to socialize, preferring the quiet solitude that allowed her to decompress from the morning's activities and prepare mentally for the afternoon ahead. The administrative burden of her position extended far beyond simple equipment distribution. Maintenance schedules required constant attention to ensure that weapons remained in proper working condition. Safety inspections demanded thorough documentation that could withstand audits from higher headquarters. Inventory discrepancies needed immediate investigation and resolution to prevent security concerns. These responsibilities required attention to detail and organizational skills that many people underestimated. When they saw only the routine aspects of her job, late afternoons often brought the most challenging requests as units prepared for training exercises or deployment activities. Multiple simultaneous demands could strain the facility's organizational systems, requiring careful prioritization and efficient workflow management. Maya had developed procedures for handling these peak periods that minimized delays while maintaining the accuracy essential for security and accountability. Her ability to remain calm under pressure had earned grudging respect from supervisors, even if they rarely acknowledged her contributions publicly. The transition from day shift to evening hours marked a subtle change in the facility's atmosphere. Fewer personnel-required services, allowing Maya to focus on administrative tasks that demanded uninterrupted concentration. She would reconcile daily transactions against inventory records, update maintenance logs with completed actions, and prepare reports for transmission to higher headquarters. These activities required mathematical precision and careful attention to regulatory requirements that governed weapons accountability throughout the military. Her commute home each evening followed the same route through base housing areas and past training facilities, where other soldiers engaged in physical fitness activities or recreational pursuits. Maya drove a modest sedan that she maintained with the same meticulous care she applied to her professional responsibilities. The vehicle was clean but unremarkable, equipped with basic features that provided reliable transportation without drawing unnecessary attention. Evening hours in her small apartment continued the pattern of quiet routine that characterized her daily existence. Dinner was typically simple, prepared from ingredients she had selected for nutritional value rather than complexity. She would review the next day's scheduled appointments while eating, mentally preparing for anticipated challenges or unusual requests. Professional development occupied portions of most evenings, whether reviewing technical manuals, studying regulatory updates, or completing online training modules required for maintaining her military qualifications. Physical fitness remained important despite the sedentary nature of her current duties. Maya maintained an exercise routine that emphasized functional strength and cardiovascular endurance, activities she pursued in the privacy of her apartment or during off-peak hours. At base facilities, her approach to fitness was methodical and consistent rather than intense, focusing on maintaining capabilities that might prove necessary in unexpected circumstances. The small details of Maya's daily existence painted a picture of someone who had found stability in routine and purpose in service, even if that service appeared mundane to outside observers. Her apartment was furnished with basic items that prioritized function over style. Books on various subjects occupied shelves built from utilitarian materials. A small television provided access to news and educational programming, though she rarely watched entertainment content. Personal photographs were notably absent, suggesting either a preference for privacy or a past that she preferred not to display prominently. Sleep came easily most nights, the result of physical tiredness and mental satisfaction from completing daily responsibilities effectively. Maya's bedroom was as organized as her workplace, with clothing arranged by function and personal items stored in designated locations. Her bedside table held only essential items, a lamp, an alarm clock, and usually one book that she might read briefly before sleep. The routine of her days had created a rhythm that supported regular sleep patterns and consistent performance. Weekend activities followed patterns that reflected her preference for solitude and personal improvement. She might visit the base library to research topics related to her professional development, or spend time maintaining her apartment with the same attention to detail that characterized her approach to work responsibilities. Occasionally she would drive to nearby towns to purchase supplies, or simply experience environments beyond the military installation. Though these excursions were brief and purposeful rather than recreational, Maya's interaction with neighbors was polite but minimal, characterized by the kind of superficial pleasantries that maintain social acceptability without encouraging deeper relationships. She had developed a reputation as a reliable, quiet tenant who caused no problems and kept her living space in excellent condition. This reputation served her well in an environment where privacy was valued and personal histories were rarely discussed unless volunteered. The photograph, tucked discreetly into her wallet, showed a younger version of Maya in a different uniform, standing beside equipment that seemed inconsistent with her current role as an armory clerk. The image was carefully preserved but never displayed, a private reminder of experiences that remained unspoken. Anyone who happened to glimpse this photograph might notice the confident posture and direct gaze that contrasted with her current demeanor, but few people ever came close enough to her personal belongings to observe such details. Joint Base Andrews operated according to an unspoken hierarchy that extended far beyond official rank structures. The installation housed multiple elite units whose members carried themselves with the unmistakable confidence of warriors who had proven their worth in combat zones across the globe. Delta Force operators moved through the base with purposeful strides and eyes that constantly assessed their surroundings. Marine Force reconnaissance teams maintained the kind of physical conditioning that made their presence felt even in casual encounters. Navy SEALs displayed the quiet professionalism that came from years of high-stakes operations where failure meant death. These elite soldiers represented the apex of military capability, and they knew it. Their uniforms bore subtle indicators of their special status, subdued unit patches that meant nothing to civilians but commanded instant respect from military personnel, combat ribbons that told stories of classified operations, and qualification badges that required years of training to earn. When they walked through the base, conversations stopped and junior personnel stepped aside, not from fear but from recognition of proven excellence. The base commander, Brigadier General Patricia Hawkins, embodied the institution's values through her own distinguished career. At 52, she had broken through multiple barriers to reach her current position, serving combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, while simultaneously earning advanced degrees and completing prestigious military education programs. Her corner office in the main administrative building displayed photographs from ceremonies where she had received decorations for valor, leadership awards from professional organizations, and commendations from foreign military officials who had worked alongside American forces. General Hawkins conducted weekly staff meetings that brought together the senior leaders from each major unit on the installation. These gatherings occurred in a conference room equipped with secure communication systems and wall-mounted displays that could present classified briefings to authorized personnel. The participants included colonels who commanded combat brigades, lieutenant colonels who led specialized battalions, and senior enlisted personnel, whose expertise in specific fields made them invaluable advisors to the command structure. During these meetings, the conversation invariably focused on operational readiness, training schedules, and resource allocation for units that would deploy to global hotspots on short notice. Budget discussions centered on acquiring advanced equipment that would provide tactical advantages in hostile environments. Personnel matters involved identifying and developing the next generation of special operations leaders. Logistics planning ensured that elite units received priority access to training facilities, transportation assets, and specialized equipment that supported their unique missions. The base's training facilities reflected this emphasis on excellence and readiness. The tactical shooting complex featured ranges that could simulate urban combat environments, with movable walls, pop-up targets, and sound systems that replicated the chaos of actual firefights. The physical fitness centers contained equipment designed to push human performance to its absolute limits, with specialized areas for climbing, obstacle navigation, and endurance challenges that separated elite soldiers from conventional troops. Combat simulation centers utilized virtual reality, technology, and computer-generated scenarios that allowed units to rehearse complex operations without expending ammunition or risking personnel safety. These facilities could replicate the environmental conditions of any location on Earth, from Arctic tundra to desert landscapes, complete with weather effects and terrain features that challenged even experienced operators. Training exercises conducted in these centers often lasted for days, testing not only tactical skills but also the mental resilience required for sustained operations under extreme stress. The medical facilities on base specialized in treating injuries common to special operations personnel. Emergency rooms were staffed by surgeons who had deployed to combat zones and understood the unique challenges of treating battlefield trauma. Rehabilitation centers focused on returning wounded warriors to operational status as quickly as possible, utilizing cutting-edge therapies and equipment that maximized recovery potential. Mental health services recognized the psychological demands placed on soldiers, who regularly faced life or death situations in classified environments. Base housing reflected the military's understanding that family stability directly impacted operational effectiveness. Senior officers occupied spacious homes in neighborhoods designed to provide privacy and security for personnel, whose work often required protection from foreign intelligence services. Enlisted housing, while more modest, maintained standards that acknowledge the sacrifices made by families whose loved ones deployed frequently to dangerous locations around the world. The base exchange and commissary catered to the needs of military families who might relocate frequently and required access to goods and services that supported their unique lifestyle. These facilities stocked specialized equipment that civilian retailers rarely carried, from tactical gear to military-specific publications. The services available on base minimized the need for personnel to venture into surrounding civilian communities, maintaining operational security while providing convenience for busy military families. Social gatherings on base reinforced the bonds between elite units and their families. Officer clubs hosted formal events where military achievements were celebrated and professional relationships were strengthened. Enlisted clubs provided more casual environments where soldiers could decompress after intensive training exercises or deployment preparations. Family readiness groups organized activities that helped spouses and children cope with the unique stresses of military life, particularly the extended separations that characterize special operations assignments. Base's proximity to Washington, D.C. added another layer of complexity to its operational environment. High-ranking Pentagon officials regularly visited to observe training exercises and receive briefings on unit capabilities. Congressional delegations toured facilities to better understand how taxpayer dollars were being utilized to maintain America's military readiness. Foreign military attaches participated in exchange programs that strengthened international partnerships while showcasing American military excellence. Security protocols throughout the installation reflected the sensitive nature of the units stationed there. Multiple checkpoint systems controlled access to different areas of the base, with biometric scanners and advanced identification systems, ensuring that only authorized personnel could enter restricted zones. Random security inspections and counterintelligence activities maintained vigilance against potential threats from hostile foreign powers or domestic extremist organizations that might target military facilities. The pace of operations at Joint Base Andrews never truly slowed. Even during apparent quiet periods, planning continued for future deployments. Training exercises pushed units to maintain peak readiness, and administrative activities ensured that the complex machinery of military logistics functioned smoothly. This constant activity created an environment where everyone understood their role in maintaining America's military superiority and took pride in contributing to that mission. Within this high-performance culture, certain positions were inevitably viewed as less critical than others. Support personnel, while officially valued for their contributions, operated in the shadows of the elite combat units that represented the base's primary mission. Administrative clerks, maintenance workers, food service personnel, and logistics specialists provided essential services, but rarely received recognition for their efforts. Their work was considered routine, predictable, and requiring minimal specialized skills. Compared to the demands placed on special operations personnel, the Armory represented one of these support functions that everyone understood was necessary, but few considered particularly challenging or important. After all, weapons storage and distribution seemed straightforward: receive equipment, catalog it properly, and issue it when requested by authorized personnel. The complexities involved in maintaining thousands of weapon systems, tracking ammunition, inventories, and ensuring compliance with countless regulations were invisible to those who simply wanted to check out their assigned equipment and return to more exciting duties. This institutional bias toward glamorous combat roles created subtle but pervasive attitudes about the relative importance of different military occupational specialties. Support personnel learned to accept their secondary status while taking quiet pride in keeping the entire system functioning effectively. They understood that without their contributions, the elite units couldn't operate, but they also recognized that their work would never receive the recognition or respect accorded to those who faced enemy fire in foreign countries. The mockery began subtly, as it often does in military environments, where hierarchy and reputation determine social standing. Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison, a Delta Force operator with 3 combat deployments and a chest full of ribbons, was the first to vocalize what many others had been thinking during their routine visits to the Armory. Standing at the equipment counter while Maya processed his weapon maintenance request, Morrison turned to his teammate and spoke just loudly enough for her to overhear. "Amazing what they'll put behind a weapons counter these days," he said, his voice carrying the casual dismissiveness of someone accustomed to being heard and respected. "Half the size of my little sister, and probably never fired anything bigger than a BB gun." His companion, Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, chuckled appropriately while glancing at Maya with the kind of assessment reserved for people deemed irrelevant to serious military operations. Maya continued typing on her computer, her fingers maintaining their steady rhythm across the keyboard as she updated equipment records. Her expression remained professionally neutral, giving no indication that she had heard the comment or cared about the speaker's opinion. Years of similar encounters had taught her that responding to such remarks only encouraged further commentary and rarely changed anyone's perspective about her capabilities or worth. The pattern established by Morrison's initial observation quickly spread throughout the Special Operations community at Joint Base Andrews. During equipment inspections, soldiers would exchange knowing glances when Maya struggled visibly to lift cases of heavy ammunition onto the counter. Her small stature made certain tasks appear more difficult than they needed to be, though few observers noticed the efficient technique she used to manage loads that would challenge much larger individuals. "Look at her trying to move that M249, whispered Private First Class Thompson during one particularly busy afternoon when Maya was retrieving squad automatic weapons for a Marine reconnaissance unit. "Probably takes her 10 minutes to figure out which end the bullets come out of." His comment drew suppressed laughter from the other Marines waiting in line, men who prided themselves on their physical strength and weapons expertise. The glasses Maya wore became another frequent target for disparaging remarks. In a military culture that often equated perfect vision with combat readiness, her need for corrective lenses marked her as someone who couldn't meet the physical standards expected of elite warriors. "Four eyes running the gun show" became a common phrase whispered just within her hearing range, always accompanied by the kind of smirks that suggested the speakers considered themselves infinitely superior to the woman distributing their equipment. Captain Sarah Williams, an Army intelligence officer with a master's degree and multiple language qualifications, represented a different type of dismissive attitude toward Maya's position. Williams approached the Armory counter with the brisk efficiency of someone who considered routine tasks beneath her intellectual capabilities and wanted to complete them as quickly as possible. Her interactions with Maya were professionally courteous but carried an undertone that suggested she viewed the Armory clerk as barely worth acknowledgement. "I need to check out night vision equipment for my team," Williams would announce, sliding requisition forms across the counter without making eye contact. When Maya asked clarifying questions about specific model requirements or duration of use, Williams would respond with barely concealed impatience, as if explaining such details to someone in Maya's position was an unnecessary burden on her valuable time. The physical demands of Maya's job provided endless opportunities for others to demonstrate their superior strength and capabilities. When she used a dolly to transport heavy equipment cases, nearby soldiers would often comment about how real soldiers could carry such loads without mechanical assistance. When she requested help moving particularly awkward items, the assistance came with condescending remarks about finding more suitable duties for someone with her obvious physical limitations. Master Sergeant Kevin Blake, a Green Beret with 15 years of special operations experience, made a habit of flexing his considerable muscles whenever Maya struggled with heavy equipment in his presence. "Maybe they should assign someone who can actually handle the gear," he would suggest to anyone within hearing distance, his tone carrying the authority of someone whose combat credentials were unquestioned. The suggestion box near the armory entrance became a repository for anonymous complaints about Maya's supposed inadequacies. "Recommend replacing current armory clerk with someone who understands weapons," read one typical submission. "Current clerk appears unfamiliar with basic military equipment and requires excessive time to complete simple tasks," stated another. These comments, while officially discouraged, reflected widespread sentiment among personnel who interacted with Maya regularly. Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, commander of a Special Operations Aviation Unit, expressed his concerns more directly during a meeting with the base supply officer. "That woman in the armory doesn't inspire confidence," he stated bluntly. "My pilots need to know that their equipment is being handled by someone who understands its importance and complexity. She looks like she'd be more comfortable filing paperwork than managing combat weapons systems." The criticism extended beyond Maya's physical appearance to include assumptions about her background and qualifications. Personnel who interacted with her regularly developed theories about how someone so obviously unsuited for weapons management had ended up in such a position. "Probably got assigned there because she couldn't handle real military duties," was a common explanation. "Administrative types who can't cut it in operational roles always end up in support positions," offered another theory during busy periods. When multiple units required equipment simultaneously, Maya's methodical approach to processing requests drew increasing impatience from soldiers accustomed to immediate gratification. "Could we speed this up?" became a frequent request, usually accompanied by checking watches and exchanging glances that suggested the delay was unreasonable given the supposedly simple nature of equipment distribution. The break room adjacent to the armory became an informal gathering place where personnel waiting for equipment would share stories about Maya's apparent incompetence. "Took her 15 minutes to find my rifle scope yesterday," one soldier would report. "Had to show her which cabinet it was stored in," another would add. These conversations, while conducted in voices low enough to maintain plausible deniability, were clearly intended to be overheard by their subject. Maya's careful attention to paperwork and regulations, while professionally appropriate, was interpreted by many as evidence of her inability to understand the bigger picture of military operations. "She acts like every requisition form is going to be audited by Congress," complained one frustrated lieutenant after Maya asked him to provide additional documentation for a non-standard equipment request. "Real operators know when to cut through red tape to get the mission accomplished." The assumption that Maya had never experienced real military service beyond her current administrative role became so widespread that newer personnel were often warned about her limitations before their first visit to the armory. "Don't expect much help from the clerk," became standard advice. "She's okay for basic stuff but doesn't really understand how the equipment works in actual operations." Even Maya's quiet demeanor was interpreted negatively by personnel who valued aggressive confidence and vocal competence. "Never seen her speak above a whisper," observed one Navy SEAL. "In combat, you need people who can communicate clearly under pressure. She'd probably freeze up if anything exciting happened around here." The cumulative effect of these constant microaggressions and dismissive attitudes created an environment where Maya was viewed as little more than a necessary obstacle between elite soldiers and their equipment. Her professional competence in managing inventory and maintaining accurate records was taken for granted, while any minor delay or procedural requirement was attributed to personal inadequacy, rather than regulatory compliance or operational necessity. The mockery began subtly, as it often does in military environments, where hierarchy and reputation determine social standing. Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison, a Delta Force operator with 3 combat deployments and a chest full of ribbons, was the first to vocalize what many others had been thinking during their routine visits to the armory. Standing at the equipment counter while Maya processed his weapon maintenance request, Morrison turned to his teammate and spoke just loudly enough for her to overhear. "Amazing what they'll put behind a weapons counter these days," he said, his voice carrying the casual dismissiveness of someone accustomed to being heard and respected. "Half the size of my little sister, and probably never fired anything bigger than a BB gun." His companion, Sergeant First Class Rodriguez, chuckled appropriately while glancing at Maya with the kind of assessment reserved for people deemed irrelevant to serious military operations. Maya continued typing on her computer, her fingers maintaining their steady rhythm across the keyboard as she updated equipment records. Her expression remained professionally neutral, giving no indication that she had heard the comment or cared about the speaker's opinion. Years of similar encounters had taught her that responding to such remarks only encouraged further commentary and rarely changed anyone's perspective about her capabilities or worth. The pattern established by Morrison's initial observation quickly spread throughout the Special Operations community at Joint Base Andrews. During equipment inspections, soldiers would exchange knowing glances when Maya struggled visibly to lift cases of heavy ammunition onto the counter. Her small stature made certain tasks appear more difficult than they needed to be, though few. Observers noticed the efficient techniques she used to manage loads that would challenge much larger individuals. "Look at her trying to move that M249, whispered Private First Class Thompson during one particularly busy afternoon when Maya was retrieving squad automatic weapons for a Marine reconnaissance unit. "Probably takes her 10 minutes to figure out which end the bullets come out of." His comment drew suppressed laughter from the other Marines waiting in line. Men who prided themselves on their physical strength and weapons expertise. The glasses Maya wore became another frequent target for disparaging remarks. In a military culture that often equated perfect vision with combat readiness, her need for corrective lenses marked her as someone who couldn't meet the physical standards expected of elite warriors. "Four eyes running the gun show" became a common phrase whispered just within her hearing range, always accompanied by the kind of smirks that suggested the speakers considered themselves infinitely superior to the woman distributing their equipment. Captain Sarah Williams, an Army intelligence officer with a master's degree and multiple language qualifications, represented a different type of dismissive attitude toward Maya's position. Williams approached the armory counter with the brisk efficiency of someone who considered routine tasks beneath her intellectual capabilities and wanted to complete them as quickly as possible. Her interactions with Maya were professionally courteous, but carried an undertone that suggested she viewed the armory clerk as barely worth acknowledgement. "I need to check out night vision equipment for my team," Williams would announce, sliding requisition forms across the counter without making eye contact. When Maya asked clarifying questions about specific model requirements or duration of use, Williams would respond with barely concealed impatience, as if explaining such details to someone in Maya's position was an unnecessary burden on her valuable time. The physical demands of Maya's job provided endless opportunities for others to demonstrate their superior strength and capabilities. When she used a dolly to transport heavy equipment cases, nearby soldiers would often comment about how real soldiers could carry such loads without mechanical assistance. When she requested help moving particularly awkward items, the assistance came with condescending remarks about finding more suitable duties for someone with her obvious physical limitations. Master Sergeant Kevin Blake, a Green Beret with 15 years of special operations experience, made a habit of flexing his considerable muscles whenever Maya struggled with heavy equipment in his presence. Maybe they should assign someone who can actually handle the gear, he would suggest to anyone within hearing distance, his tone carrying the authority of someone whose combat credentials were unquestioned. The suggestion box near the armory entrance became a repository for anonymous complaints about Maya's supposed inadequacies. Recommend replacing current armory clerk with someone who understands weapons. Read one typical submission. Current clerk appears unfamiliar with basic military equipment and requires excessive time to complete simple tasks, stated another. These comments, while officially discouraged, reflected widespread sentiment among personnel who interacted with Maya regularly. Lieutenant Colonel James Patterson, commander of a Special Operations Aviation Unit, expressed his concerns more directly during a meeting with the base supply officer. "That woman in the armory doesn't inspire confidence," he stated bluntly. "My pilots need to know that their equipment is being handled by someone who understands its importance and complexity. She looks like she'd be more comfortable filing paperwork than managing combat weapon systems." The criticism extended beyond Maya's physical appearance to include assumptions about her background and qualifications. Personnel who interacted with her regularly developed theories about how someone so obviously unsuited for weapons management had ended up in such a position. Probably got assigned there because she couldn't handle real military duties, was a common explanation. Administrative types who can't cut it in operational roles always end up in support positions, offered another theory. During busy periods when multiple units required equipment simultaneously, Maya's methodical approach to processing requests drew increasing impatience from soldiers accustomed to immediate gratification. "Could we speed this up?" became a frequent request, usually accompanied by checking watches and exchanging glances that suggested the delay was unreasonable given the supposedly simple nature of equipment distribution. The break room adjacent to the armory became an informal gathering place where personnel waiting for equipment would share stories about Maya's apparent incompetence. "Took her 15 minutes to find my rifle scope yesterday," one soldier would report. "Had to show her which cabinet it was stored in," another would add. These conversations, while conducted in voices low enough to maintain plausible deniability, were clearly intended to be overheard by their subject. Maya's careful attention to paperwork and regulations, while professionally appropriate, was interpreted by many as evidence of her inability to understand the bigger picture of military operations. "She acts like every requisition form is going to be audited by Congress," complained one frustrated lieutenant after Maya asked him to provide additional documentation for a non-standard equipment request. Real operators know when to cut through red tape to get the mission accomplished. The assumption that Maya had never experienced real military service beyond her current administrative role became so widespread that newer personnel were often warned about her limitations before their first visit to the armory. "Don't expect much help from the clerk," became standard advice. "She's okay for basic stuff but doesn't really understand how the equipment works in actual operations." Even Maya's quiet demeanor was interpreted negatively by personnel who valued aggressive confidence and vocal competence. "Never seen her speak above a whisper," observed one Navy SEAL. "In combat, you need people who can communicate clearly under pressure. She'd probably freeze up if anything exciting happened around here." The cumulative effect of these constant microaggressions and dismissive Attitudes created an environment where Maya was viewed as little more than a necessary obstacle between elite soldiers and their equipment. Her professional competence in managing inventory and maintaining accurate records was taken for granted, while any minor delay or procedural requirement was attributed to personal inadequacy rather than regulatory compliance or operational necessity. The first crack in Maya's carefully constructed facade appeared on a Tuesday morning when Sergeant First Class Danny Cooper brought in a malfunctioning M4 carbine that had been giving his unit persistent problems. Cooper, a respected Army Ranger with 2 Purple Hearts, had tried everything his weapons training had taught him, but the rifle continued to jam during critical moments of training exercises. 3 other armorers on base had examined the weapon and declared it beyond field repair, recommending replacement through normal supply channels. Maya accepted the rifle with her usual quiet efficiency, but as she examined the weapon, her hands moved across its surfaces with a familiarity that seemed inconsistent with her administrative background. Her fingers traced the bolt carrier group with practiced precision, checking tolerances and clearances that most supply clerks wouldn't recognize. Within minutes, she had field-stripped the weapon completely, laying out components in an organized pattern that demonstrated intimate knowledge of the M4's internal mechanisms. "Gas port's been drilled oversize," she murmured, more to herself than to Cooper, who was watching her examination with growing interest. "Probably done in theater to compensate for poor ammunition quality, but it's creating excessive back pressure. That's causing your extraction problems." Her voice carried a technical confidence that seemed at odds with her usual hesitant manner when discussing equipment specifications with customers. Cooper leaned forward, suddenly paying attention in a way he hadn't during previous visits to the armory. "You can tell that just by looking at it?" he asked, genuine curiosity replacing his typical impatience with support personnel. Most armorers would need specialized gauges and measurement tools to diagnose such a subtle problem, yet Maya had identified the issue through visual inspection and tactile examination. Maya's cheeks reddened slightly as she realized she had revealed more expertise than her cover identity should possess. "I've seen similar problems before," she said carefully, attempting to downplay her obvious competence. Previous assignment included some weapons maintenance duties. The explanation was technically truthful while omitting the context that would have raised uncomfortable questions about her background. The repair Maya performed over the next hour demonstrated skills far beyond what anyone expected from an armory clerk. Using tools that most supply personnel wouldn't know how to operate, she carefully modified the gas port to restore proper cycling while maintaining the weapon's reliability. Her movements were precise and confident, suggesting countless hours of experience working on similar problems under field conditions, where improper repairs could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. When Cooper test-fired the repaired weapon at the base range later that day, it functioned flawlessly for the first time in months. Word of Maya's unexpected competence spread quickly through his unit, though the story was received with skepticism by those who had previously dismissed her as incompetent. "Cooper must have fixed it himself and given her credit to be nice," was the common explanation among personnel, who couldn't reconcile their preconceptions with evidence of her actual abilities. Couldn't reconcile their preconceptions with evidence of her actual abilities. Similar incident occurred 3 weeks later when Lieutenant Martinez's reconnaissance team returned from a training exercise with night vision equipment that had suffered damage during a simulated combat operation. The sophisticated AN/PV S14 monoculars were considered total losses by the unit's electronics technician, who recommended returning them to depot-level maintenance facilities for complete refurbishment or replacement. Maya examined the damaged equipment with the same methodical approach she had used with Cooper's rifle. Her inspection revealed problems that weren't immediately visible to casual observation. Internal moisture damage that had affected delicate electronic components, misaligned optical elements that would degrade image quality, and housing. Cracks that compromised the unit's waterproof integrity. Most supply clerks would have simply processed the paperwork to send the equipment away for professional repair. Instead, Maya disappeared into a back room of the armory that most personnel didn't know existed. The space contained workbenches equipped with precision tools, optical alignment equipment, and electronic testing devices that seemed more appropriate for a specialized repair facility than a basic storage depot. She worked on the night vision devices for several hours, carefully disassembling complex mechanisms and replacing damaged components with parts that she somehow had available in her personal inventory. Lieutenant Martinez was skeptical when Maya informed him that his equipment was ready for pickup. Night vision devices were notoriously sensitive instruments that required factory-level expertise to repair properly. Yet when his team tested the refurbished units during their next training exercise, the equipment performed better than it had when originally issued. The optical clarity was perfect, the electronic functions operated flawlessly, and the waterproof seals held under conditions that would challenge brand new equipment. "Where did you learn to work on NODs?" Martinez asked during his next visit to the armory, using the military slang for night observation devices. His tone carried the respect typically reserved for personnel with proven technical expertise, a marked change from his previous dismissive attitude toward Maya's capabilities. Maya's response was characteristically evasive. "Technical training covers a lot of different systems," she said, focusing on her computer screen rather than making eye contact. "You pick up various skills over time." The answer satisfied Martinez's curiosity without providing any specific information about where or when she had acquired such advanced technical knowledge. Word of these incidents began to create subtle changes in how certain personnel viewed Maya's role at the armory. Soldiers who had previously considered her a bureaucratic obstacle started bringing equipment problems directly to her attention, hoping she might offer solutions that traditional maintenance channels couldn't provide. Her success rate in resolving complex technical issues was remarkable, though she consistently downplayed her contributions and deflected credit to others whenever possible. Master Sergeant Patricia Valdez, a military intelligence specialist with extensive overseas experience, noticed Maya's uncanny ability to identify foreign weapon systems during routine inspections of captured equipment. When examining an AK-74 variant that had been acquired during a training exchange with Allied forces, Maya correctly identified the weapon's country of origin, approximate year of manufacture, and specific modifications that indicated military versus civilian production. Such detailed knowledge required extensive field experience with enemy weapon systems. "That's a Bulgarian Circle 10, probably manufactured between 2008 and 2012, Maya observed while cataloging the weapon for storage. The receiver markings and stock design are characteristic of their military export models. The barrel's been shortened from standard length, which suggests it was modified for special operations use." Her analysis was more comprehensive than reports produced by intelligence specialists who had spent years studying foreign weapon systems. Valdez's attempts to engage Maya in further discussion about foreign weapons were politely deflected, but the Master Sergeant's suspicions were aroused. Very few people outside of intelligence and special operations communities possess such detailed knowledge of enemy equipment characteristics. Maya's expertise suggested access to classified information and field experience that seemed inconsistent with her current administrative assignment. The pattern of unusual competence extended to areas beyond weapons and equipment. During a base emergency drill that simulated a terrorist attack, Maya's response demonstrated familiarity with security protocols and tactical procedures that most support personnel wouldn't recognize. While other administrative staff followed basic evacuation procedures, Maya positioned herself in locations that provided optimal fields of observation and routes of egress. suggesting tactical awareness that came from specialized training or operational experience. Captain Jennifer Walsh, the base security officer, observed Maya's behavior during the drill with professional interest. "She moves like someone who's been in actual threat environments," Walsh noted to her deputy. Situational awareness, threat assessment, positioning for maximum tactical advantage. That's not behavior you learn from safety briefings and administrative training. Maya's personal habits also hinted at a background that differed significantly from her official file. Her physical fitness routine, while conducted privately, maintained conditioning levels that exceeded requirements for administrative personnel. Neighbors in base housing occasionally observed her running at hours when most people were sleeping, maintaining a pace and endurance that suggested serious athletic training. Her route selections avoided main roads and populated areas, following patterns that minimized visibility and observation by others. The books Maya checked out from the base library reflected interests that seemed unusual for someone in her position. Technical manuals on advanced weapon systems, studies of foreign military tactics, and analysis of international conflict situations were not typical reading material for supply clerks. The librarian, Master Sergeant Rodriguez, noticed that Maya's reading preferences suggested someone with professional interest in combat operations and military strategy rather than administrative duties. During conversations with maintenance personnel, Maya occasionally referenced procedures or techniques that weren't covered in standard technical manuals. Her suggestions for improving equipment storage and handling reflected understanding of how military hardware performed under combat conditions, knowledge that typically came from deployment experience in hostile environments. When questioned about these insights, Maya would attribute them to common sense or previous training, explanations that satisfied casual curiosity without revealing specific sources of her expertise. The emergency alert system at Joint Base Andrews screamed to life at 0347 hours on a gray Wednesday morning in November, its piercing wail cutting through the pre-dawn silence like a blade through fabric. Maya jerked awake in her small apartment, instantly alert in the way that separated experienced soldiers from civilian sleepers. The base-wide notification meant only one thing: a genuine threat had been detected, not another routine drill designed to test response procedures. Her secure phone buzzed against the nightstand, displaying a priority message that made her blood run cold. Actual hostile penetration confirmed. All personnel report to designated safe areas immediately. This is not a drill. The words glowed accusingly on the small screen, transforming what should have been another quiet night into a crisis that would test every person on the installation. Maya moved through her apartment with practiced efficiency, pulling on her uniform and boots while mentally cataloging the weapons and equipment stored in the Armory facility. If hostile forces had actually penetrated base security, they would inevitably target critical infrastructure, and the weapons storage areas represented prime objectives for any enemy force seeking to maximize damage or acquire advanced military hardware. The base communication system crackled with urgent updates as Maya drove through empty streets toward the Armory complex. Multiple breaches confirmed at perimeter checkpoints Alpha, Charlie, and Delta, reported the watch commander, his voice tight with controlled tension. Estimate 15 to 20 hostiles armed with automatic weapons and possible explosives. All units implement lockdown procedures immediately. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the normally busy base roads as security teams rushed toward their assigned positions. Maya could see muzzle flashes in the distance where base security forces had engaged the intruders near the main administration building. The sound of automatic weapons fire echoed off concrete structures, creating an acoustic nightmare that made it difficult to determine the exact locations of ongoing firefights. The Armory facility appeared secure when Maya arrived. It's reinforced. Doors and window barriers still intact, despite the chaos erupting elsewhere on the installation. She activated the building's internal security systems and began a systematic inventory of available weapons, knowing that base defenders might soon require additional firepower to repel the attack. The responsibility for protecting thousands of weapons from enemy acquisition rested squarely on her shoulders. All Armory personnel, report status immediately, came the urgent radio transmission from base security. Maya keyed her microphone, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Armory Delta 7 secure, all weapons accounted for. Standing by for further instructions. The response came immediately. Maintain defensive posture. Do not allow any weapons to fall into hostile hands under any circumstances. Through the Armory's reinforced windows, Maya could observe the tactical situation developing across the base. The intruders had clearly conducted detailed reconnaissance before their assault, striking simultaneously at multiple locations to divide the defenders' attention and create maximum confusion. Explosions near the communications center suggested they were attempting to disrupt command and control capabilities, a sophisticated approach that indicated professional military training. The base's elite units were responding with disciplined efficiency, but Maya could see they were outnumbered and fighting from disadvantaged positions. Delta Force operators had established defensive perimeters around critical facilities, but the attackers' coordinated assault had caught even these elite soldiers partially unprepared. Marine reconnaissance teams were conducting counterattacks, designed to break up the enemy's offensive momentum, but their progress was slow against determined resistance. A massive explosion rocked the fuel depot, approximately half a mile from the Armory, sending a column of flame and smoke high into the night sky. The blast illuminated the entire base in flickering orange light, revealing the scope of destruction already achieved by the attacking force. Secondary explosions followed as fuel lines ruptured and storage tanks caught fire, creating a conflagration that would burn for hours regardless of the battle's outcome. Maya's radio crackled with increasingly desperate communications from embattled security teams. "We're taking heavy casualties at Checkpoint Charlie," reported one unit leader. "Request immediate reinforcement and medical support." Another transmission followed seconds later. "Enemy forces have breached the main gate. They're moving toward the aircraft hangars with what appears to be demolition equipment." The realization struck Maya like a physical blow. The attackers weren't simply conducting a harassment raid designed to inflict casualties and withdraw. They were systematically destroying base infrastructure and moving toward objectives that would cripple Joint Base Andrews' operational capability permanently. The aircraft maintenance facilities house some of the military's most advanced helicopters and transport planes, assets that represented millions of dollars in taxpayer investment and irreplaceable strategic capability. Master Sergeant Blake's voice burst through the radio static, his usual calm demeanor replaced by urgent desperation. "Any unit in vicinity of the airfield. We have enemy demolition teams moving on the helicopter hangars. They're carrying enough explosives to level the entire complex. We can't reach them in time with current manpower." The implication was clear. Without immediate intervention, the base would lose its entire rotary wing fleet. Maya stared through the Armory windows at the distant hangars where millions of dollars worth of aircraft sat vulnerable to destruction. The elite units that should have been protecting those assets were pinned down in firefights across the base, unable to disengage without abandoning their current defensive positions. The enemy had planned their assault with devastating effectiveness, creating a tactical scenario where every choice involved unacceptable losses. "All units, be advised," came another transmission from the base commander. "Intelligence indicates this attack is designed to destroy our strategic airlift capability. The enemy appears to be a foreign-sponsored team with specific objectives related to our overseas deployment capabilities. They must not be allowed to succeed in their mission." The stakes had just escalated beyond a simple base security incident to an act of international warfare. The sound of approaching vehicles drew Maya's attention to the access road leading to the Armory complex. 3 enemy fighters and captured. Base security vehicles were racing toward her position, their intent unmistakably hostile. The Armory's defensive systems would delay them temporarily, but the facility wasn't designed to withstand a determined assault by trained military personnel carrying explosives and automatic weapons. Maya's mind raced through available options as she watched the enemy vehicles approach. The Armory's communication systems would allow her to call for help, but every security unit on base was already engaged in life-or-death struggles with other enemy elements. The weapons stored in the facility represented exactly what the base defenders needed to turn the tactical tide. But those same weapons would become devastating assets in enemy hands. If the Armory fell, the first enemy vehicle slammed into the Armory's outer security barrier, its occupants immediately beginning to deploy explosives designed to breach the reinforced entrance. Maya could hear them shouting in a foreign language as they worked, their professional efficiency indicating extensive training in demolition techniques. The barrier would hold for perhaps 10 minutes before succumbing to their assault, leaving Maya alone to defend thousands of weapons from enemy acquisition. Her radio sparked with a final, desperate transmission from the helicopter hangar area. Enemy demolition teams are in position. We estimate 3 minutes until detonation. Any unit that can intervene, please respond immediately. The voice carried the resignation of someone who had accepted inevitable defeat, a tone that Maya had heard too many times in places far from home where good soldiers died because help arrived too late. Maya looked around the Armory facility, her eyes settling on weapons and equipment that represented capabilities far beyond what anyone expected her to possess. The Barrett M82, a 1.50 caliber sniper rifle, sat in its designated rack, a precision instrument capable of engaging targets at distances that would make intervention possible. Night vision equipment could provide the visibility needed for accurate shooting in darkness. Tactical gear could transform her from a supply clerk into something far more dangerous. The decision crystallized in her mind with the clarity that comes when all alternatives have been exhausted and only action remains. The base's elite units were trapped in defensive positions. The enemy was systematically destroying critical infrastructure, and the weapons needed to change the tactical situation were sitting unused in storage racks around her. Someone had to act, and she was the only person in position to make a difference. Maya moved toward the weapons storage area with purpose that 7 years of careful anonymity couldn't suppress. The woman who had hidden behind administrative duties and avoided attention was about to step aside, making room for the soldier she had never truly stopped being. The crisis demanded capabilities that Sergeant Maya Chun wasn't supposed to possess, but Staff Sergeant Alexandra Morgan had once wielded with deadly effectiveness in places that didn't exist on official maps. If you're enjoying stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. Maya stood frozen in the center of the Armory, her hands trembling slightly as the weight of decision pressed down upon her shoulders like a physical burden. 7 years of carefully constructed anonymity hung in the balance. 7 years of deliberate mediocrity and calculated invisibility that had allowed her to disappear into the comfortable obscurity of administrative duties. The person she had worked so hard to bury was clawing at the surface of her consciousness, demanding to be acknowledged as the base burned around them. The explosions outside grew closer, each detonation rattling the Armory's reinforced windows and sending vibrations through the concrete floor beneath her feet. Through the security monitors, she could see enemy fighters methodically placing demolition charges on the helicopter hangar doors, their movements efficient and purposeful. In less than 3 minutes, millions of dollars worth of aircraft would be reduced to twisted metal and shattered dreams of missions that would never be flown. Her eyes drifted to the photograph tucked discreetly in her wallet. The image of a younger woman in desert camouflage standing beside a Barrett rifle in some godforsaken valley where American soldiers had died for causes that remained classified. Staff Sergeant Alexandra Morgan had been someone who never hesitated when lives hung in the balance, someone who measured success by missions accomplished rather than personal safety maintained. That woman had possessed skills that could change the trajectory of this battle, but accessing those capabilities meant destroying everything Maya Shun had built. The radio crackled with another desperate transmission from the hangar area. 2 minutes until detonation. We've lost contact with the response teams. If anyone can help us, we're running out of time. The voice belonged to Master Sergeant Rodriguez, a maintenance supervisor whose only crime had been reporting to work early to prepare aircraft for a training mission. He would die along with his crew unless someone intervened, and Maya was the only person in position to act. She moved toward the Barrett rifle with mechanical precision, her muscle memory overriding conscious thought as her hands began the familiar routine of weapons preparation. The rifle came away from its rack with surprising weight, 57 pounds of precision engineering, designed to deliver devastating accuracy at distances that challenged human perception. Her fingers traced the weapon's familiar contours, recognizing modifications and improvements that had been implemented since her last operational use of similar equipment. The ammunition storage locker required her administrative access codes. Ironic confirmation that the bureaucratic position she had used to hide her identity now provided the means to resurrect it. Armor-piercing incendiary rounds nestled in foam padding, each cartridge representing the pinnacle of ballistic technology and capable of penetrating hardened targets at ranges exceeding a mile. Maya selected a full complement of ammunition with the practiced efficiency of someone who had performed identical preparations under far more challenging circumstances. Night vision equipment transformed her appearance from administrative clerk to tactical operator, the sophisticated optics providing crystal clear visibility across the darkened base. Through the enhanced imagery, she could observe enemy positions with startling clarity, noting their defensive postures and identifying weaknesses that could be exploited by someone with appropriate skills and equipment. The tactical situation was desperate, but not hopeless for an operator with the right training and sufficient motivation. Maya's hands moved across her body armor with automatic precision, adjusting straps and checking connections that would maintain protection and mobility during extended operations. The familiar weight of tactical gear settled around her shoulders like an old friend returning after a long absence, each piece of equipment finding its designated position through countless hours of repetitive training. The transformation from supply clerk to combat operator was occurring despite her conscious reluctance to embrace that identity. The armory's roof access provided the elevated position necessary for long-range precision shooting, though reaching. It required navigating security systems and obstacles designed to prevent unauthorized access. Maya's administrative privileges allowed her to bypass electronic locks, while her knowledge of the facility's construction guided her through maintenance corridors that most personnel never knew existed. Each step carried her further from the safety of anonymity and closer to the moment when her carefully hidden capabilities would be exposed. Emergency lighting cast stark shadows across the rooftop as Maya emerged into the chaos of the ongoing battle. Muzzle flashes sparkled across the base like deadly fireflies, marking positions where brave soldiers fought against overwhelming odds. The helicopter hangars glowed with the reflected light of enemy activity, demolition teams making final preparations for destruction that would cripple American military capability for months or years to come. Setting up the Barrett rifle required establishing a stable firing position that could accommodate the weapon's massive recoil while providing accurate target engagement. Maya arranged sandbags and equipment to create a shooting platform that met the exacting standards she had learned during sniper training that officially never existed. The rifle's bipod locked into position with a satisfying click, its legs adjusted to provide optimal stability for the shots that would either save the base or reveal her identity to everyone who witnessed her actions. The scope's crosshairs revealed details of the enemy operation that were invisible to unaided observation. Foreign manufactured explosives were being positioned with professional precision, their placement calculated to maximize structural damage and ensure complete destruction of the aircraft storage facilities. The demolition teams consisted of individuals whose movements and equipment suggested extensive military training, possibly special operations personnel operating under foreign sponsorship. Maya's finger found the rifle's trigger with familiar intimacy, muscle memory guiding her through preparatory motions that had once been as natural as breathing. The weapon's safety mechanism disengaged with a subtle click that seemed unnaturally loud in the relative quiet of her rooftop position. 2 minutes remained before detonation, 2 minutes to engage multiple targets across significant distances, while maintaining the precision necessary to prevent catastrophic collateral damage. The first target appeared in her crosshairs, an enemy fighter positioning charges against the main hangar door. The range was approximately 800 meters, well within the Barrett's effective engagement envelope, but requiring compensation for wind conditions and target movement. Maya's breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm that preceded accurate shooting, her heartbeat settling into the steady pattern that allowed precise trigger control during critical moments. Her radio headset crackled with final transmissions from base security forces. 30 seconds to detonation. All personnel clear the hangar area immediately. The countdown had begun, marking time until destruction that would affect American military operations far beyond Joint Base Andrews. Maya's finger tightened on the trigger as years of suppressed training asserted itself, transforming her from reluctant observer to active participant in the battle for her adopted home. The internal conflict between self-preservation and duty reached its crescendo as Maya prepared to fire the shot that would end her anonymity forever. Once she pulled that trigger, everyone would know that the quiet armory clerk possessed capabilities that contradicted everything they believed about her background and qualifications. The comfortable obscurity that had protected her for 7 years would shatter like glass, exposing her to questions and scrutiny that could destroy the new life she had built. But the alternative was watching good soldiers die while she possessed the means to save them, a moral burden that Staff Sergeant Alexandra Morgan had never been able to bear. The woman who had disappeared into administrative duties to escape the weight of command responsibility was being forced to acknowledge that some obligations transcended personal safety and comfortable anonymity. The base needed a sniper, and she was the only person available to fill that role. Maya's world narrowed to the precise relationship between crosshairs and target, wind speed and bullet trajectory, breathing rhythm and trigger pressure. The mathematical calculations that governed long-range precision shooting flowed through her consciousness with automatic precision, compensating for environmental factors that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Her finger applied steady pressure to the trigger as the moment of decision arrived with inexorable finality. The Barrett rifle thundered to life with a bone-shaking roar that echoed across the base like divine judgment. Maya's first shot struck the lead demolition specialist's center mass, the .50 caliber round tearing through his body armor as if it were tissue paper and dropping him instantly beside the explosive charges he had been positioning. The massive bullet continued through its target and into the hangar door beyond, leaving a hole that would have impressed even the most experienced marksman with its precision and devastating power. Maya cycled the bolt action with fluid efficiency, her movements economical and precise as muscle memory overrode conscious thought. The empty brass casing ejected with a metallic ring, already forgotten as she acquired her second target through the rifle's high-powered scope. An enemy fighter was reaching for the dead man's detonator, clearly intending to complete the demolition mission despite the sudden appearance of sniper fire. The crosshairs settled on his torso as Maya calculated wind drift and bullet drop with computational speed that came from countless hours of training. Under conditions that officially never existed, the second shot arrived before the enemy soldier could process the threat, striking him in the chest and spinning him away from the explosive device with violent finality. His automatic rifle clattered across the concrete as his body crumpled beside equipment that would have erased millions of dollars in American military assets. Maya was already transitioning to her third target, a fighter attempting to take cover behind a maintenance vehicle while clutching what appeared to be a backup detonator. Through her scope, Maya could observe the remaining demolition team members, struggling to understand what was happening to their carefully planned operation. They had expected opposition from base security forces armed with conventional weapons, not precision fire from a sniper positioned at extreme range, with equipment capable of penetrating their body armor like paper. Their tactical discipline was evident in how quickly they attempted to adapt to the new threat, but their training hadn't prepared them for engagement by someone with Maya's level of expertise. The third shot punched through the maintenance vehicle's engine block before continuing into the enemy fighter hidden behind it, demonstrating the Barrett rifle's ability to defeat cover that would protect against smaller caliber weapons. Maya watched through her scope as the man's body jerked with the impact, his backup detonator spinning away into darkness where it could no longer threaten the aircraft storage facility. 3 targets eliminated in less than 30 seconds each. Shot placed with surgical precision that spoke of capabilities far beyond anything expected from an armory clerk. Radio transmissions exploded with confusion and amazement as base security personnel observed the sudden neutralization of the demolition threat. Unknown sniper has engaged enemy targets at the helicopter hangar, reported Master Sergeant Blake, his voice carrying disbelief that barely masked professional admiration. 3 confirmed kills at approximately 800 meters. Demolition threat appears neutralized. The transmission sparked immediate curiosity about the identity of the marksman, who had appeared from nowhere to save the base's aircraft. Maya was already shifting her attention to secondary threats, her tactical awareness encompassing the entire base rather than focusing solely on the hangar area. Through her night vision equipment, she could observe enemy fighters near the communications center, attempting to complete their sabotage mission while base defenders remained pinned down by suppressing fire. The range was nearly 1,200 meters, approaching the limits of even the Barrett rifle's effective engagement envelope, but well within the capabilities of someone with Maya's training and experience. The 4th shot required compensation from multiple environmental factors that would challenge even experienced snipers. Wind conditions had shifted since her initial engagements, requiring adjustment to her point of aim. The target was partially concealed behind concrete barriers that would deflect or fragment lesser projectiles. The extreme range demanded precise calculation of bullet trajectory and flight time that allowed for target movement during the projectile's travel. Maya made these calculations with automatic precision, her mind processing ballistic data with the speed that separated elite marksmen from ordinary shooters. The enemy communications specialist never knew what killed him, the massive bullet arriving with supersonic crack followed immediately by the distant thunder of the rifle report. His body pitched forward onto the equipment he had been sabotaging, explosive charges scattering across the ground as his dead hands released their deadly burden. Maya observed the remaining enemy fighters near the communications center breaking cover and retreating toward predetermined extraction points, their mission priorities shifting from sabotage to survival. Base security forces immediately moved to capitalize on the sniper support, advancing from defensive positions they had been forced to maintain against superior enemy numbers. Delta Force operators began coordinating tactical movements with the unknown marksman, using her precision fire to suppress enemy positions while they maneuvered for decisive advantage. The tide of battle was shifting dramatically as Maya's intervention allowed friendly forces to regain tactical initiative. They had lost during the initial enemy assault. Maya's fifth shot eliminated an enemy machine gunner who had been preventing Marine reconnaissance teams from advancing toward critical infrastructure. The range exceeded 1,300 meters, requiring her to aim significantly above the target while compensating for crosswinds that could deflect the bullet by several feet during its extended flight time. The shot struck the enemy fighter in the upper torso, the massive impact spinning him away from his weapon and ending the suppressing fire that had pinned down friendly forces for the past 20 minutes. The remaining enemy fighters were beginning to understand that their carefully planned operation had been compromised by a single sniper, whose capabilities exceeded anything in their intelligence preparation. Maya could observe them through her scope, attempting to locate her position, their movements becoming increasingly erratic as the psychological pressure of precision fire from an unseen enemy began affecting their tactical discipline. Several fighters abandoned their assigned objectives and began moving toward extraction points, prioritizing survival over mission completion. Maya's sixth shot targeted an enemy leader who was attempting to rally his scattered forces near the fuel depot. The man's body language and position within the group clearly identified him as someone with command authority, making him a high-value target whose elimination would further disrupt enemy coordination. The bullet struck him center mass at a range of nearly 1,100 meters, dropping him immediately and causing the fighters around him to scatter in panic as they realized their leadership was being systematically eliminated. Radio communications revealed the growing impact of Maya's intervention on the overall tactical situation. Enemy forces are withdrawing from multiple positions, reported the base commander. Unknown sniper support has neutralized key targets and allowed our forces to regain initiative. All units press the attack and prevent enemy extraction. The transformation from desperate defense to aggressive counterattack had occurred within minutes of Maya's first shot, demonstrating the disproportionate impact that expert marksmanship could have on battlefield dynamics. Maya continued engaging targets of opportunity as enemy forces attempted to withdraw from the base perimeter. Her seventh shot eliminated a fighter carrying what appeared to be classified documents stolen from base headquarters. The eighth neutralized an enemy specialist attempting to destroy aircraft maintenance equipment that couldn't be easily replaced. Each shot demonstrated precision and tactical judgment that reflected years of experience in environments where mistakes carried fatal consequences for American forces and their allies. The Barrett rifle's distinctive report had become a psychological weapon in its own right, each thunderous crack announcing to friend and foe that an expert marksman was controlling critical sectors of the battlefield. Enemy fighters began avoiding open areas and concentrating their movements in covered terrain, sacrificing tactical flexibility for protection against sniper fire. Their withdrawal became increasingly disorganized as Maya's continued presence forced them to abandon equipment and objectives they had spent months planning to capture or destroy. Maya's ninth shot struck an enemy vehicle attempting to extract personnel and equipment from the base perimeter. The .50 caliber round penetrated the engine block and continued into the passenger compartment, disabling the vehicle and forcing its occupants to continue their retreat on foot. The psychological impact of losing their primary extraction asset further demoralized enemy forces who were already struggling to maintain unit cohesion under constant sniper pressure. Base security cameras recorded Maya's actions from multiple angles, capturing footage that would later be analyzed by military experts seeking to understand how a single shooter had reversed the trajectory of an entire battle. Her shooting positions, target selection, and engagement sequences revealed tactical sophistication that contradicted everything in her official personnel file. The woman who had been dismissed as incompetent was demonstrating mastery of skills that few people in the entire military possessed. As dawn broke over Joint Base Andrews, casting golden light across the smoke-stained battlefield. Colonel Marcus Webb climbed the maintenance ladder to the Armory rooftop, where the mysterious sniper had changed the course of the entire engagement. His weathered face bore the expression of a career officer who had seen impossible things become reality. But nothing had prepared him for what he discovered at the Barrett rifle's firing position. Staff Sergeant Maya Chun sat behind the massive weapon with her small frame dwarfed by the precision instrument that had delivered salvation to the base. Her wire-rimmed glasses caught the morning sunlight as she methodically cleaned the rifle's barrel with movements that spoke of intimate familiarity with the weapon's maintenance requirements. Empty brass casings lay scattered around her position, in neat rows, each one representing an enemy life taken with surgical precision at distances that challenged human capability. Jesus Christ, Colonel Webb breathed, his command authority momentarily forgotten in the face of cognitive dissonance that threatened to overwhelm his understanding of reality. Maya, you're telling me that our quiet little armory clerk just saved this entire base? His voice carried the bewilderment of someone trying to reconcile 7 years of assumptions with evidence that contradicted everything he thought he knew about the woman before him. Maya looked up from her cleaning routine, meeting the colonel's stare with eyes that no longer carried the hesitant uncertainty that had characterized her interactions with superior officers. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable, as if a mask had been removed to reveal someone who had been hiding in plain sight for years. Colonel, she acknowledged with a nod that carried military precision, without the excessive deference that had marked her previous behavior. Webb circled the shooting position, examining the arrangement of equipment and ammunition that told the story of a firefight conducted with professional competence. Sandbags had been positioned to create optimal stability for long-range shooting. Night vision equipment was arranged for immediate access during target acquisition. Spare magazines were laid out in patterns that allowed rapid reloading without taking eyes off the scope. Every detail reflected tactical knowledge that wasn't taught in supply school. 12 confirmed kills, Webb said, consulting the preliminary after-action report that base security had compiled. Longest shot recorded at 1,430 meters. Perfect ammunition conservation with 0 wasted rounds. Target selection that demonstrated tactical awareness of enemy command structure and mission priorities. He paused, studying Maya's profile as she continued her methodical weapon maintenance. Where exactly did a logistics specialist learn to shoot? Like this? Maya's hands stilled on the cleaning rod as she considered her response. 7 years of careful deception hung in the balance, but the evidence surrounding her position made denial impossible. The official story that had protected her identity couldn't survive scrutiny from anyone with basic understanding of military capabilities. I had some specialized training before my current assignment, she said carefully, choosing words that acknowledged the obvious without revealing classified details. Colonel Webb's expression shifted from bewilderment to suspicion as he began connecting dots that had been invisible during Maya's years of administrative service. Specialized training doesn't cover what happened here this morning. This level of marksmanship requires years of dedicated development under combat conditions. The tactical decision-making I witnessed suggests operational experience that goes way beyond anything in your official file. The sound of approaching footsteps announced the arrival of Master Sergeant Cooper, who emerged onto the rooftop carrying a thick manila folder marked with security classifications that immediately drew Maya's attention. His expression combined professional curiosity with the wariness of someone who suspected that routine assumptions were about to be shattered. "Colonel, you're going to want to see this," Cooper said, extending the folder toward his superior officer. Webb accepted the documents with growing apprehension, recognizing the classification markings that indicated access to information well above his normal clearance level. As he read the contents, his face underwent a series of transformations that reflected his struggle to process revelations that redefined everything he thought he understood about his base's personnel. Staff Sergeant Alexandra Morgan, he read. Aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. Graduated top of her class from the Army Sniper School. Multiple combat deployments with classified special operations units. Maya closed her eyes as her carefully constructed identity crumbled like a house built on shifting sand. The name she had abandoned 7 years ago hung in the air between them, carrying weight of achievements and tragedies that she had spent years trying to forget. Staff Sergeant Alexandra Morgan had been someone who never missed her target, someone who measured success in missions accomplished and lives saved. Maya Chun had been someone who could disappear into bureaucratic anonymity and avoid the moral complexities that came with exceptional capabilities. 17 confirmed kills during Operation Desert Silence. Webb continued reading, his voice gaining strength as the scope of Maya's hidden background became clear. Credited with single-handedly disrupting enemy communications network during Battle of Qam. Recommended for Medal of Honor following classified action in Yemen that prevented terrorist attack on American embassy. He looked up from the file, meeting Maya's gaze with new understanding. You're not just some supply clerk who got lucky with a rifle. Cooper stepped forward, his own weathered face reflecting the amazement of someone who had spent months working alongside a legend without recognizing her true identity. The Yemen operation, he said quietly, that was you? The sniper who took out an entire terrorist cell from 2 kilometers away in a sandstorm. His tone carried the reverence that elite soldiers reserve for achievements that transcended normal human capability. Maya nodded once, acknowledging the operation that had ended her career as Staff Sergeant Alexandra Morgan and began her exile as Maya Chun. 17 targets eliminated in 43 minutes, she confirmed, her voice carrying the matter-of-fact tone that professional soldiers used when discussing their deadliest achievements. The mission was successful, but the aftermath made it impossible to continue operating under my real identity. Webb flipped through additional pages in the classified file, revealing a story of betrayal and sacrifice that explained Maya's presence at Joint Base Andrews. Says here you were burned by an intelligence leak that compromised your identity to hostile forces. Multiple attempts on your life forced the Army to declare Staff Sergeant Morgan killed in action and create a new identity for your protection. His expression softened as he understood the personal cost of the service that had brought her to his command. The revelation explained countless small mysteries that had puzzled Maya's colleagues over the years. Her uncanny ability to repair complex weapons systems reflected expertise gained through years of field operations where equipment failure meant mission compromise. Her tactical awareness during emergency drills came from experience in environments where situational awareness determined survival. Her physical fitness routine maintained capabilities that might be needed if her past ever caught up with her present. The official story says Staff Sergeant Morgan died heroically defending American diplomats in Yemen. Webb continued, his voice gaining respect for the woman who had sacrificed her identity for national service. But Alexandra Morgan has been hiding in my armory for 7 years, maintaining weapons and filing paperwork while carrying skills that could change the outcome of any battle. He closed the file and looked directly at Maya. Why didn't you ever say anything? Maya met his gaze with the direct honesty that had characterized her brief return to operational status. Because Maya Chun was supposed to be ordinary. Someone who could fade into the background and live a normal life without the weight of command decisions or the burden of being responsible for other people's survival. She gestured toward the empty brass casings scattered around her position. But some responsibilities can't be avoided when lives are at stake. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, illuminating the full extent of damage that Maya's intervention had prevented. The helicopter hangars stood intact, their multi-million-dollar aircraft ready for missions that would have been impossible if the enemy demolition teams had succeeded. The communications center continued functioning, maintaining contact with Pentagon officials who were demanding detailed reports about the base's defensive response. The fuel depot smoldered, but hadn't exploded, preserving strategic reserves that supported American military operations across multiple theaters. Colonel Webb studied the tactical situation map that base security had prepared, noting the precise locations where Maya's shots had eliminated key enemy personnel at ranges that challenged belief. 1,400 meters in darkness with crosswinds, he mused, tracing the longest shot on the map. Most snipers can't make that shot in daylight with perfect conditions. You did it while under pressure, with the entire base depending on your accuracy. Master Sergeant Cooper examined the Barrett rifle that had delivered such devastating effectiveness in Maya's hands. This weapon hasn't been fired in months, he observed, noting the pristine condition of the barrel in action. You picked up a rifle you'd never used before and immediately began hitting targets at extreme range. That level of adaptability only comes from someone who understands the fundamental principles of long-range shooting at an instinctive level. Maya began packing the specialized equipment she had used during the engagement, her movements efficient and professional as she restored the Armory's security posture. Night vision devices were returned to their storage cases. Ammunition was accounted for and logged, and the Barrett rifle was prepared for cleaning and maintenance that would erase evidence of its recent use. The transformation back to administrative duties was occurring with the same precision that had characterized her emergence as a combat operator. What happens now? Webb asked, recognizing that Maya's cover identity had been permanently compromised by her actions. The footage recorded by base security cameras would be analyzed by intelligence specialists who would immediately recognize her tactical signature. Reports of the engagement would reach officials who remembered Staff Sergeant Alexandra Morgan's legendary capabilities. The quiet anonymity that had protected her for 7 years was gone forever. Maya shouldered her equipment with practiced ease, already accepting the consequences of her decision to intervene in the battle. Now Maya Chen goes back to filing paperwork and managing inventory, she said with a slight smile that acknowledged the impossibility of returning to her former anonymity. And Staff Sergeant Morgan stays buried in classified files where she belongs. The news of Maya's true identity spread through Joint Base Andrews with the velocity of wildfire consuming dry timber. By noon, every soldier on the installation had heard some version of the story about the quiet armory clerk who had single-handedly turned the tide of battle with precision shooting that defied belief. Conversations in mess halls, barracks, and training facilities centered on the cognitive dissonance between their assumptions about Maya Chen and the reality of Staff Sergeant Alexandra Morgan's legendary capabilities. Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison stood in the armory doorway 3 days after the battle, his usual swagger replaced by the humble posture of someone seeking forgiveness for past transgressions. The same man who had mocked Maya's physical stature and questioned her competence now approached her counter with hat in hand, literally and figuratively. His Delta Force patches and combat decorations seemed less impressive in the presence of someone whose achievements dwarfed his own operational experience. "Sergeant Chen," Morrison began, his voice carrying none of the dismissive arrogance that had characterized their previous interactions. "I came to apologize for my comments about your capabilities. I had no idea about your background or what you've accomplished in service to this country." He paused, struggling with words that didn't come naturally to someone accustomed to projecting confidence and superiority. "I was wrong about you, completely and inexcusably wrong." Maya looked up from her inventory reports, studying Morrison's face for signs of insincerity or calculated manipulation. Instead, she found genuine remorse and the kind of humility that came from having one's worldview fundamentally challenged by undeniable evidence. "Apology accepted," she replied simply, her tone carrying neither resentment nor satisfaction. "We all make assumptions based on limited information." Morrison shifted uncomfortably, clearly expecting a more lengthy discussion of his previous behavior and its impact on their professional relationship. Maya's gracious response left him without an outlet for the guilt that had been consuming him since learning about her true identity. "Is there anything I can do to make up for my behavior?" he asked, genuinely seeking some form of redemption. "Treat people with respect regardless of their apparent status," Maya answered, returning her attention to the paperwork that continued despite the base's recent trauma. "You never know who might surprise you when circumstances demand their best efforts." The lesson was delivered without preaching or condescension, a simple statement of truth that carried more weight than any lecture about military values and professional courtesy. Captain Sarah Williams entered the armory later that afternoon, her usual brisk efficiency replaced by nervous uncertainty as she approached Maya's workstation. The intelligence officer who had previously treated Maya with barely concealed condescension now moved with the careful deference of someone walking through a minefield of embarrassment and professional miscalculation. "Sergeant, I need to discuss some equipment requirements for my team," Williams began, her voice lacking the impatient authority that had marked their previous interactions. She placed requisition forms on the counter with unusual care, as if afraid that sudden movements might somehow offend the woman she had previously dismissed as irrelevant to serious military operations. Maya reviewed the paperwork with her characteristic thoroughness, but Williams noticed subtle changes in their interaction dynamic. Where previously Maya had responded to questions with hesitant uncertainty, she now displayed quiet confidence that suggested complete mastery of her responsibilities. Her explanations of equipment specifications carried technical depth that revealed extensive knowledge of operational requirements and tactical applications. "About the night vision requirements you specified," Maya said, examining the technical specifications with expert eyes. "The AN PVs-31s would be better suited for your mission profile than the PVs-14s you've requested. Better depth perception and peripheral awareness for urban environments." Her recommendation demonstrated understanding of intelligence operations that went far beyond what anyone expected from supply personnel. Williams accepted the suggestion with visible relief, grateful for expertise that she had previously been too arrogant to recognize or utilize. "Thank you for the recommendation. I should have asked for your input on equipment selection much earlier." The admission cost her considerable pride, but she recognized that her previous attitude had prevented her from accessing valuable knowledge that could have improved her team's effectiveness. Master Sergeant Kevin Blake arrived at the armory that evening, his imposing physical presence somehow diminished by the humility that had replaced his former swagger. The Green Beret, who had made a habit of demonstrating his superior strength whenever Maya struggled with heavy equipment, now approached her with the respectful demeanor reserved for proven warriors whose achievements commanded universal recognition. "Sergeant Morgan," Blake said, using her real name for the first time since her identity had been revealed. "I wanted to thank you personally for saving our base. My team was pinned down near the communications center when you eliminated that machine gun position. You saved our lives with that shot." His gratitude was profound and genuine, untainted by the competitive dynamics that typically characterized interactions between elite soldiers. Maya nodded acknowledgement of his thanks while continuing to organize equipment for the next day's operations. "Just doing my job," she replied, echoing the standard response that professional soldiers used to deflect praise for actions they considered routine. But Blake recognized the inadequacy of that modest dismissal given the extraordinary nature of her intervention. "That wasn't just doing your job," Blake insisted, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who had witnessed exceptional performance under extreme pressure. "What you did out there was artistry with a rifle. 14 confirmed kills at ranges that most snipers only dream about, in darkness, under combat stress, with equipment you'd never used before." He paused, searching for words adequate to express his admiration. "I've worked with some of the best shooters in the military, and None of them could have pulled off what you accomplished. The transformation in how base personnel viewed Maya extended beyond individual apologies and expressions of gratitude. Conversations in common areas that had previously featured jokes about her supposed incompetence now centered on speculation about her classified achievements and the operations that had established her legendary reputation. Soldiers who had dismissed her as a bureaucratic obstacle began approaching her for technical advice and professional guidance. Lieutenant Martinez visited the armory to return equipment his reconnaissance team had used during a training exercise. But his real purpose was to satisfy curiosity about Maya's background that had been consuming him since the battle. "Sergeant, if you don't mind me asking, how long were you operational before coming here?" His question carried the respectful tone that junior officers used when addressing senior enlisted personnel whose experience exceeded their own. Maya considered her response carefully, weighing the benefits of maintaining some mystery against the value of honest communication with subordinates who had earned the right to understand her capabilities. "Long enough to learn that every mission teaches you something about yourself and your limits," she answered diplomatically. "The important thing is applying those lessons when circumstances demand your best performance." Martinez nodded thoughtfully, recognizing that her non-answer contained more wisdom than most detailed explanations could provide. "The guys in my unit have been wondering if you might be willing to provide some marksmanship instruction," he sighed hopefully. "We could all benefit from learning from someone with your level of expertise." "I'll consider it," Maya replied, though her tone suggested that stepping back into a training role would require careful consideration of the risks and benefits involved. Teaching marksmanship would inevitably reveal more details about her operational background while potentially attracting unwanted attention from intelligence agencies that might prefer her to remain anonymously buried in administrative duties. Base Commander Brigadier General Hawkins visited the armory personally to discuss Maya's future assignment within the installation's organizational structure. Her presence represented a dramatic change in how senior leadership viewed the facility and its personnel, elevating the armory from a routine support function to a critical asset requiring careful management and protection. "Sergeant, I've been reviewing options for utilizing your capabilities more effectively while maintaining your security requirements," General Hawkins began, her tone reflecting the respect accorded to personnel whose classified achievements commanded attention at the highest levels. "We could establish a specialized training program that allows you to share your expertise without compromising operational security." Maya appreciated the general's consideration of both her professional capabilities and personal safety requirements. "I'm willing to discuss possibilities that serve the base's mission while maintaining appropriate discretion about my background," she replied, acknowledging that her cover identity had been permanently compromised while expressing willingness to contribute more directly to operational readiness. The most significant change in Maya's daily routine came from the steady stream of visitors seeking her technical expertise and professional advice. Soldiers who had previously viewed her as an impediment to efficient equipment procurement now recognized her as a valuable resource, whose knowledge could enhance their operational effectiveness. Her workstation became an informal consultation center where experienced operators sought guidance on equipment selection, tactical applications, and technical problems that challenged their understanding. Master Sergeant Rodriguez approached Maya with a damaged scope that 3 other technicians had declared beyond repair. "Everyone says you're the person to see about fixing things that can't be fixed," he said hopefully, extending the expensive optics toward her workstation. His confidence in her abilities reflected the growing reputation for technical competence that had replaced assumptions about her inadequacy. 6 months after the attack on Joint Base Andrews, Maya stood before a new group of recruits in the base's advanced marksmanship facility, her official designation now Senior Weapons Instructor, rather than Armory Clerk. The same worn boots that had once drawn mockery from elite soldiers now carried her across training grounds, where she taught the next generation of warriors about precision, patience, and the deceptive nature of first impressions. The recruits assembled before her represented the cream of military talent, each one selected for advanced training based on demonstrated excellence in their respective fields. Yet as Maya observed their confident postures and appraising glances, she recognized the same arrogance that had once characterized the soldiers who dismissed her as incompetent. They saw a small woman with wire-rimmed glasses and assumed they understood her limitations before she ever spoke. "My name is Staff Sergeant Morgan," Maya began, her voice carrying quiet authority that immediately commanded attention. "Over the next 8 weeks, I'll be teaching you advanced marksmanship techniques that could save your lives and the lives of your teammates in combat situations. But before we discuss shooting, we need to talk about assumptions." She gestured toward the Barrett rifle mounted on a display stand beside her position. 6 months ago, an enemy force penetrated this base's security and came within minutes of destroying millions of dollars worth of aircraft and killing dozens of American service members. The attack was stopped by a single sniper using this weapon to engage targets at ranges exceeding 1,400 meters in darkness. The recruits leaned forward with obvious interest, eager to hear details about the legendary engagement that had become part of base folklore. Stories of the mysterious sniper's intervention had grown in the telling, but few people knew the complete truth about what had occurred during those critical minutes when the base's fate hung in the balance. The person who saved this base was someone that elite soldiers had mocked for years, Maya continued, allowing the lesson to build naturally toward its conclusion. They dismissed her as weak, incompetent, and unsuited for serious military duties. They made jokes about her appearance, questioned her qualifications, and treated her as an obstacle to efficient operations. She moved to the Barrett rifle, her hands tracing its familiar contours with obvious expertise. What they didn't know was that their incompetent armory clerk had graduated at the top of her class from sniper school, served multiple combat tours with classified special operations units, and possessed a service record that included 17 confirmed kills during a single engagement in Yemen. The recruits' expressions shifted from casual interest to intense attention as they began to understand the implications of Maya's story. The woman standing before them wasn't just relating historical events. She was the legendary sniper whose actions had saved Joint Base Andrews from catastrophic destruction. "The soldiers who survived that attack learned something that I want you to understand from the beginning of your training," Maya said, her voice taking on the gravity of hard-earned wisdom. "Excellence doesn't always announce itself with flashy displays and loud proclamations. Sometimes the most capable people are those who work quietly in the background, maintaining their skills and waiting for the moment when circumstances demand their best efforts." She picked up the Barrett rifle, shouldering it with practiced ease despite its considerable weight. "This weapon doesn't care about your rank, your physical appearance, or your social status. It responds only to competence, training, and the will to act when others hesitate. The same principle applies to the people you'll serve alongside throughout your military careers." Maya set the rifle back on its stand and faced the assembled recruits directly. "You'll encounter individuals who don't fit your preconceptions about what warriors should look like. Some will be small in stature, quiet in manner, or unconventional in their approach to military service. Your challenge is to recognize their value before circumstances force that recognition upon you." The lesson continued with practical instruction in marksmanship fundamentals, but the underlying message about human potential and hidden capabilities resonated through every aspect of the training. Maya's own transformation from dismissed supply clerk to respected instructor served as a constant reminder that assumptions about others often revealed more about the observer than the observed. During breaks between shooting exercises, recruits would approach Maya with questions that went beyond technical aspects of marksmanship. They wanted to understand how someone could maintain such extraordinary capabilities while appearing ordinary to casual observation. Her answers emphasized the importance of continuous self-improvement, professional dedication, and the wisdom of allowing performance to speak louder than appearance. The best operators I've known were often people who could blend into any environment, Maya explained to one particularly curious recruit. They understood that standing out in a crowd could be a liability in their line of work, so they cultivated the ability to appear unremarkable while maintaining skills that could change the outcome of any situation. As the training program progressed, Maya watched her students develop not only improved marksmanship skills, but also enhanced appreciation for the diverse forms that military excellence could take. They learned to evaluate their peers based on performance rather than preconceptions, creating a more inclusive and effective training environment where everyone's contributions were valued. The impact of Maya's story extended far beyond the marksmanship facility. Throughout Joint Base Andrews, personnel began examining their own assumptions about colleagues, whose quiet competence they might have previously overlooked. Maintenance technicians, administrative clerks, food service workers, and other support personnel found themselves receiving newfound respect as soldiers recognized that exceptional capabilities could be found in unexpected places. Maya's worn boots, once a source of mockery, became symbols of the experience and dedication that characterized true professionals. Soldiers began evaluating each other based on performance and character, rather than superficial indicators of status or capability. The base's culture shifted toward one that celebrated competence regardless of its packaging. The universal lesson that emerged from Maya's story resonated far beyond military circles. In every profession and social setting, people make snap judgments about others based on limited information and personal biases. The quiet accountant might be a brilliant strategist, the unassuming janitor could be a published author, and the soft-spoken receptionist might possess skills that could save lives in an emergency. Maya's transformation from dismissed armory clerk to respected instructor demonstrated that human potential often lies dormant beneath surfaces that don't immediately suggest greatness. The challenge for all of us is developing the wisdom to recognize that potential before circumstances force its revelation, and the humility to acknowledge when our initial assessments prove inadequate. Her story serves as a powerful reminder that in a world obsessed with first impressions and superficial indicators of worth, the most extraordinary people might be hiding in plain sight, waiting for the moment when their unique combination of skills and dedication can make a difference that others thought impossible. Have you ever encountered someone who completely defied your initial expectations? Someone whose hidden talents emerged when circumstances demanded their best efforts? Share your stories in the comments below about times when you discovered that appearances can be profoundly deceiving. And if you want to hear more incredible tales of ordinary people achieving extraordinary things, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Remember, the next person you underestimate might be the one who saves your life.